Who doesn't remember the glory days of Nokia? And then they made a step towards Windows Phone, which at the time actually made sense for me. Having that third competitor was a good thing. While it wasn't for me in terms of how it worked, again, it made sense. The biggest downfall, however, was app support. It just didn't have the app support that you can easily get on Google, for instance. And therefore, we saw the fall down of Nokia that we loved, to now turning in Nokia HMD, which to me still makes no sense because I feel like they have no clue what their path is at the moment. Either way, let's have a look back at the Nokia N9. And I got this in mint condition. With the old Nokias, how can we not but start at its design? Because it truly feels timeless. The way they designed Nokias in those days feels more like an art piece with smooth and seamless curves, with integrations that make sense to make sure it feels undisrupted. Everything feels like it's united and made out of a single piece of material. Everything feels like it belongs and nothing feels out of place. To the smallest detail, to having a unique charging port opening and how you get in your SIM card. It allows this piece of hardware to make me feel like I'm missing out of something that we simply don't have today. And that includes the size itself as well. The design combined with the small size makes this such a nice phone to use. The typing experience, while it requires some relearning because of the smaller keyboard, is so much nicer. There isn't an uncomfortable reaching to the other side, shifting the phone and trying to be as athletic as possible to reach the other side, where you simply give up and use both hands at the end. But the design isn't the only thing that is timeless. The Nokia N9 almost feels like a phone that looked into the future and picked those things that today are standard, but weren't back then. This goes from having a brand like Zeiss joining into the camera department, which is something that we see with a lot of phones these days, but also having things like a nice sharp AMOLED display, NFC support, Bluetooth and an always on display. And as bonus, it also includes the lovely 3.5mm headphone jack that many have ditched. Sure, when it comes to the camera, it doesn't have the algorithms that you have today, but even then I would make a comment that it does certain things better than many phones do these days. Starting with the focus. The Nokia N9 has much better autofocus on small subjects than many other phones I've used till this day, being able to get really nice and close up. Again, sure, it doesn't have the details that many phones have these days, but again, for the time and for what it is able to do with the hardware, it still manages to do certain things better. And simply, the more I look and play around with the Nokia N9, the more I feel like this brand should never have gone the way it has. The way of sadly being bought by HMD. I know this sounds harsh, and yes, there are people that worked with the Nokia of old that are now connected to Nokia HMD, but the philosophy and the approach simply isn't the same. And part of this is down to how phones are now, with it being more and more about larger phones and of course having 30 different cameras on the rear. But it's also the philosophy of the design that still could simply be implemented if done right. The only thing Nokia HMD feels connected to these days is possibly build quality based on phones that I had from Nokia, but also sadly the price. While I moved on from using smaller phones, having used this for a small amount of time, I have to say it makes me miss the comfort that I experienced with this Nokia N9, which gladly I got as stated in this beautiful mint condition. But this is also a part of the joy of using older phones, having to experience something that I never used because I never bought a Nokia N9. But I will have to say, looking at it now, I kinda wish I did. And I kinda wish I looked at different phones to see how they were. But back then, I was mostly using Samsung. I didn't really look at other brands. Therefore, I would always say, open your eyes for other brands and see what is out there. Because sadly, you can miss out, which is proven in this video. Because even till this day, I will still say that this phone feels unique and a truly different experience, especially based on phones that I used around that time. Also, if you want me to use other older phones, let me know in the comments below. I will see what I can do when it comes to these older experiences, but I'm very curious to know what you think of the Nokia N9, but also what other phone you want me to check out. And currently I'm also looking at other Nokia devices to see which one I want to check out again, and of course from other brands as well. Right now, for instance, I have my eyes on, of course, an HTC 10. I'm trying to see if I can find one that is in mint condition and also not crazy in terms of pricing. Looking back at older phones is quite a nice challenge to see how I experience it these days, but also what was very different back then. At the end, does it hold up to a modern phone? No, of course not. It's an older phone. It doesn't have the same features that you have on modern phones. Like the camera, for instance, definitely doesn't compete with current phones, especially when it's dynamic range that is really important. But apart from that, there's a lot of comfort in a phone that just really fits well in the hand, where you are easily able to reach every single corner of the phone itself. That makes this phone really nice to hold, and it's making me miss smaller phones a lot, simply because, well, it is so comfortable. Just in general, to hold something where you can reach those corners, where you don't really have to struggle and shift around and play around with the phone in the hope that you don't drop it and reach every part that you need. Not to mention that also, of course, in terms of how it feels in hand, it's done really well. I kind of have this like feeling of a pebble, if that makes sense, where it just shaped really nicely. Everywhere there's curves and whatnot. Yes, it does have a straight top and bottom, but it just makes it feel so good in the hand because of those subtle curves that you have on the back going to the frame, and just the overall design has been done really well. Either way, this is the Nokia that we used to know, and the Nokia that I still miss till this day, because it's a shame that we don't see a phone brand like this out there anymore, like it was back then. And no, I'm not talking about Nokia HMD. Even though I love the Nokia 7 Plus and did a really good job with that phone, it's a shame to see the current Nokia HMD doing what they are doing now. Either way, hope you enjoyed this video. And of course, if you did, don't forget to subscribe, like, and everything. And talk to you guys in the next.